The pharmacy lights buzzed faintly against the humid Georgia night, a sterile glow that bled out onto the cracked pavement of the near-empty strip mall. It was almost 9:30 p.m. Most of the shops had gone dark. A late summer breeze stirred the litter at the curb, but even the wind felt tired. Butter Naomi Ellis stepped out of her weathered Camry, locking the door with a soft click. She adjusted the strap on her canvas bag, the weight of a day's labor still pressing heavily on her shoulders. After 32 years as a community doctor, serving patients others overlooked, she had grown used to exhaustion. But tonight, it sank deeper, not just into her bones, but her spirit. She walked slowly into the pharmacy, one she'd visited countless times, hoping only to pick up a refill for her blood pressure medication and head home for a hot bath. Simple, routine, harmless. Inside, the store was nearly empty. A young clerk at the counter barely looked up from his phone. The smell of floor cleaner mixed with the sharp tang of antiseptics. Naomi gave him a soft smile, polite, respectful, tired. She handed over her prescription slip, insurance card, and ID like she'd done dozens of times before. "Hi, sweetheart," she said gently. "I just need my refills for enalapril. It should be ready." The clerk, no older than 19, nodded vaguely and began typing. Minutes passed, too many, his brows furrowed, his fingers hovered. Then, without looking up, he muttered something into the headset he wore. Naomi noticed the shift immediately. A few moments later, a woman in a corporate vest and a clipped haircut approached from the back of the store. Carla. She wore a name badge. Her expression was all tight lines and suspicion. "Good evening," Carla said, her tone overly sweet. "We're having a bit of an issue with your account." Naomi raised an eyebrow, calm but direct. "What kind of issue? I've been coming here for over 10 years. Carla gave a tight-lipped smile. "Some discrepancies with the insurance information. It doesn't match what's in the system." Naomi gently gestured to one of the ID and documents on the counter. "Everything's here. You can see for yourself." "We're going to need a little time to sort this out," Carla replied, already stepping back. "If you could just wait here while we call the proper channels." Something in the way she said proper channels made Naomi's jaw tighten. Not in fear, she'd long learned how to manage that, but in recognition. This was familiar. Too familiar. The clerk looked up now, eyes uncertain, almost apologetic. Naomi noticed his hand tremble slightly as he set her ID back down. He wasn't in charge here. She folded her arms. "Are you telling me you're calling the police over a prescription refill?" Carla didn't answer. She disappeared behind the pharmacy counter with clipped steps, whispering to someone on the phone. Naomi stood motionless. The silence pressed in. Outside, a pair of headlights cut across the parking lot. Then sirens, low and far, but growing closer. Naomi's shoulders squared. She didn't run. She didn't panic. She'd stood in hospital corridors and told grieving mothers that their sons wouldn't wake up. She had walked through the clinic doors past protesters who spat at her for serving immigrant families. Fear had no claim on her anymore. The door chimed again as two uniformed officers entered. Both white, one older, thick-necked and smug, the other younger, hesitant, still trying to look tougher than he was. Carla rushed forward. "That's her," she hissed, like Naomi was a fugitive. She tried to use someone else's insurance. She wouldn't cooperate. The older cop, Officer Brad Cutler, didn't even glance at the documents still lying on the counter. He stepped toward Naomi, his voice firm and falsely friendly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step outside." Naomi didn't flinch. "Wait, so now, we've had a report of prescription fraud. You match the description." "What description?" she asked, her tone calm, pointed. "The one with gray hair and a tired face? Or the one where being black at a pharmacy late at night is a red flag?" The second officer, Ryan Tate, shifted uncomfortably. Brad didn't blink. "Let's not make this difficult." Naomi picked up her ID, held it up. My name is Dr. Naomi Ellis. I've been picking up this medication here for years. My information is valid. Your suspicion is not. Brad's eyes narrowed. His hand went to his belt. Ma'am, I won't ask again. And then without another word, he grabbed her wrist. Gasps echoed from the back of the store. A woman in the shampoo aisle pulled out her phone. A man near the cold remedies ducked behind a shelf and began recording. Naomi didn't resist. She didn't scream. As the cuffs bit into her skin, she stood tall. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," she said. Brad just smirked. "We'll see." But what none of them saw, what none of them could have imagined, was that this wasn't just a nurse. This wasn't just another tired black woman who'd take it quietly. Naomi Ellis was a storm, and tonight they had just walked into its path. The back seat of the patrol car smelled like sweat and rubber. The handcuffs dug into Naomi Ellis's wrists, sharp metal pressing bone, but she didn't fidget. She didn't slouch. Her spine stayed straight, her gaze fixed on the blurred city lights outside the tinted glass. This wasn't the first time she'd seen injustice, but this was the first time she wore its bruises on her skin. Officer Brad Cutler sat in the front seat, smug behind the wheel, humming low and off-key to himself like this was just another routine call, like he hadn't just paraded a respected physician out of a pharmacy in front of strangers, cameras, and whispered judgment. Next to him, Officer Ryan Tate kept glancing into the rearview mirror. His jaw clenched. His fingers tapped nervously against his thigh. He hadn't said much, but Naomi could feel it, that tremor in his conscience, the silent war inside him. She spoke, calm and measured. "You didn't even ask to verify my information." No answer. "You saw a black woman at a counter, and that was all you needed." Still nothing from Brad, but Ryan's eyes flicked toward her again. "You think your badge is a shield," she continued, voice low, slicing through the silence. "But tonight it's a mirror." Brad laughed dryly. "You like giving speeches, huh?" Naomi didn't flinch. "I like telling the truth." The precinct loomed ahead, an aging yellowed building with flickering fluorescent lights and a cracked sign that read Savannah Police Department, South Division. The car rolled into the lot. The building looked small, but its history was heavy. Too many stories had passed through those walls. Too many had never come back out the same. Brad opened her door with theatrical impatience. "Let's go." Naomi stepped out slowly. She didn't look around for sympathy. She didn't ask for kindness. She only walked. Tall, steady, deliberate. Every step she took through those precinct doors was a declaration. "You will not reduce me." Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and bleach hung thick in the air. Officers leaned against desks, phones rang, keyboards clicked. Conversations faltered as Naomi entered. Faces turned. Some recognized her. Some just stared, but none spoke. Brad led her toward the booking desk. "Suspected prescription fraud," he announced loud enough for half the room to hear. No resistance, just confusion about who she is. The sergeant behind the desk raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He began the paperwork with mechanical indifference. Naomi stood still, hands still cuffed, refusing to lower her eyes. The camera flash for the mugshot came without warning. A quick, brutal snap of light. The shutter click echoed like a slap. The fingerprinting was worse. Cold ink, careless handling, red wrists pressed against the surface with no dignity left in the process. The cell they finally placed her in was narrow, gray and metallic. No windows, just a steel bench bolted to concrete and a buzzing light overhead that flickered in protest, like it too wanted to look away. As the door clanged shut behind her, Naomi exhaled slowly. Not in surrender, but in steel-willed control. She sat, she breathed, and then she waited. She knew what was coming, because Naomi wasn't just a doctor. She wasn't just another black woman wrongly accused. She was the daughter of Charles Ellis, a retired federal judge, a former civil rights attorney whose reputation still made state officials pause before they signed anything controversial. And more importantly, Naomi had allies, not the kind who made noise online for a day and disappeared, the kind who had built their careers dismantling corruption brick by brick. Who answered the phone after midnight when injustice rang? Who kept receipts? She shifted her wrist slightly, wincing at the welt the handcuffs had left. That was evidence now. Outside the cell, voices murmured. Then footsteps, quick, uncertain. The same officers who had paraded her through the pharmacy were now watching videos from multiple angles. A customer's phone footage had already been uploaded. Another clip was circulating on Twitter. And then there was the one recorded by a bystander in the parking lot, zoomed in, clear audio. In that video, Naomi could be seen calmly handing over her ID, her voice unwavering, her face tired but composed. There was no scene, no resistance, no fraud, just judgment and cuffs. By the time the first news alert hit local outlets, community doctor detained and pharmacy mix-up, the wheels were already turning. Across town in a quiet brick home with ivy curling around the porch, Charles Ellis stood in a darkened study, reading the initial reports on his iPad. His face didn't move, but his hand tightened on the glass of water he held. His daughter, handcuffed, paraded, publicly humiliated. He picked up the phone with no hesitation in his voice. "Activate it," he said simply. "Call in the committee. Tonight." Then he hung up. Back in the cell, Naomi's phone, confiscated but not yet turned off, buzzed on the officer's desk. Dozens of notifications in a matter of minutes. Emails, texts, calls. One name appeared more than once. Erica Manette, civil rights attorney and Naomi's longtime friend. In Washington, D.C., the Judicial Integrity Watchdog received a ping from their crisis desk. Within minutes, a thread was trending. "My star, stand with Naomi." Inside the cell, Naomi closed her eyes and sat straighter. This wasn't about her ego. This wasn't even just about her. It was about every woman who'd ever been silenced, and every mother who'd been judged on sight, every daughter that was expected to bow her head and take it. No, not this time. This time they had the wrong one. And the storm she was about to summon, it would not whisper, it would roar. It was 10:24 p.m. when the precinct's front phone began ringing, not just once, but over and over, every 10 seconds like a metronome of reckoning. The desk sergeant finally snatched up the receiver. "South Division, Sergeant Loomis." The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "This is Deputy Director Carla Monroe with the Office for Civil Rights Enforcement. I'm calling regarding a detainee named Dr. Naomi Ellis, born October 7th, 1981. Are you familiar?" The sergeant froze. Yes, ma'am. You are advised to preserve all documents, camera footage, audio, digital logs, and desk activity involving this arrest, effective immediately. A federal inquiry has been opened. I strongly recommend you begin cooperating before it becomes a subpoena. Click. Silence followed, thick as concrete. The shift supervisor looked up from his desk. "Everything okay?" Loomis didn't answer. In the holding cell, Naomi sat cross-legged, her back against the wall. Her hands, though sore, were folded neatly in her lap. Her breathing was steady. She practiced this kind of stillness for years. In medical school cadaver labs, in emergency rooms where chaos spun like a storm, in courtrooms she'd stood in beside her father. Stillness wasn't passivity. Stillness was preparation. And across the city, her allies were moving. 11:03 p.m., Washington, D.C., the lights never really went out in Erica Manette's law office. She sat beneath a soft lamp glow, glasses perched low on her nose, laptop open, and 4 phones buzzing. The footage from the pharmacy had already hit three major news outlets. On screen, Naomi's calm composure was impossible to ignore. So was the officer's aggression. So was the manager's smugness. So was the wrongness of it all. Erica drafted a cease and desist letter to the Savannah Police Department, copying three federal offices and two investigative reporters. Attached were timestamps, eyewitness contact lists, and a formal demand for release. No fluff, just precision. Then she made one more call. "Charles, it's time." The older man's voice came through like gravel and thunder. "Already there." Back at the precinct, Brad Cutler was pacing, his jaw clenched. His bravado from earlier was beginning to fray. "You think she's got people calling around?" he muttered. Ryan Tate rubbed his forehead. "Think we overreacted." Brad scoffed. "Don't get soft now. We followed protocol." Ryan looked at him, something new in his eyes, something ashamed. "Did we?" Brad didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because at that moment, two black SUVs pulled into the station lot. No lights, no sirens, just quiet, deliberate arrival. Out stepped three federal officers, two in tailored suits, one in a DOJ windbreaker. With them, Charles Ellis. The man's reputation preceded him like lightning before a storm. His face was carved from marble, dignified, furious, silent. He didn't bother introducing himself. He walked straight to the front desk. "I'm here for Dr. Naomi Ellis. She's my daughter. I want eyes on her. Now." Sergeant Loomis stood up too fast, knocking over a cup. "She's in holding, sir, but..." "No buts. Get me the duty lieutenant. And a chair. I'm not leaving until she walks out with me." Inside the cell, the door creaked open. A young officer, shaky, eyes wide, stood in the frame. "Dr. Ellis, we're releasing you." Naomi didn't move at first. "Have the charges been cleared?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "Is there a written statement confirming that I was wrongfully detained?" The officer blinked. I'm not sure, but I can check." "You do that," she said, standing slowly, "because I don't walk out of this place quietly. Not this time." When she stepped through the hallway, escorted by two federal agents, the precinct was silent. Officers looked away. Phones were left ringing. Even Brad Cutler had disappeared into the locker room. And then she saw him, her father. Standing still in the hallway, silver hair haloed by the fluorescence, jaw set like iron. "Daddy," she whispered. He opened his arms. She walked straight in, collapsed into his chest. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't need to. He said what mattered. "You're not alone." 11:58 p.m. Outside the precinct, news vans had arrived. But Naomi didn't address the press. Not yet. Not until she had the statement in her hand. Not until the full picture of what had been done was laid bare for the country to see. Because this wasn't just about a wrong arrest. This was about the rot that allowed it. And she was no longer content to survive. She intended to expose and to rebuild, brick by crumbling brick. 7:36 a.m. The next morning, the sun rose over Savannah like it had a point to prove. Sharp rays sliced through the clouds, casting long shadows over the courthouse steps. The city looked the same, but something had shifted. The streets didn't hum with routine. They pulsed. Naomi stood at her kitchen window, cradling a warm mug between aching hands. The band marks from the handcuffs were still faintly red, tender. But she didn't flinch when she lifted the cup. Pain was familiar. Dignity was stronger. Her phone buzzed nonstop on the counter. 37 missed calls, 51 text messages, hundreds of notifications. Her inbox flooded with media requests, civil rights lawyers, student unions, and religious leaders. People weren't just watching now, they were listening. 9:12 a.m., Courthouse Plaza. By the time Naomi arrived, a full press setup had already been erected. Camera crews elbowed for position. Microphones lined the portable podium. Behind them, the courthouse loomed, once a place that silenced so many voices like hers. Today, it would amplify one. Beside her stood Charles Ellis, not as a father, but as her quiet force. The man who once pulled systemic rot into daylight through decades of FBI work now stood as her shadow, her protector, her living reminder that legacy didn't come from titles. It came from truth, spoken out loud. The crowd had grown. Students, mothers, pastors, veterans, young professionals in scrubs and suits, all holding signs that didn't scream but declared, "I am Naomi. We are done being silent. Dignity can't be erased." Naomi stepped forward. No script, no teleprompter, just her voice. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was steady, low, but unshakable. "Last night I was handcuffed in front of strangers for trying to pick up my heart medication. Not because I broke a law, but because someone decided I didn't look like I belonged." She paused. "I've spent 18 years as a trauma physician. I've held the hands of people breathing their last. I've treated officers, soldiers, and strangers alike. Never once did I ask what their background was before I helped them." The silence that followed was electric. And yet, I was accused of being a thief. I was told my ID wasn't enough. I was told that following directions meant guilt. I was told to step outside, like I didn't deserve to exist inside. She gripped the sides of the podium. "But I didn't come here to talk about my pain. I came here to talk about yours, because what happened to me isn't rare. It's ordinary, and that should terrify us." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some teared up, some nodded silently. We have been conditioned to accept humiliation as routine. We have been taught to stay polite while being profiled, to stay quiet while being violated, to stay still while being erased. Naomi leaned forward. "No more." Across the country, the ripple began. TV networks cut live into the press conference. Hashtags exploded on social media. I am Naomi. Not one. More quiet. Arrest, dignity. Uncuffed people shared their stories. A father dragged out of a bank after a teller doubted his account. A teenager was forced face first to the ground for loitering outside his own home. A cancer patient denied her meds because her insurance didn't look right. The nation didn't look away this time, because Naomi's story wasn't just Naomi's. It was everyone who had ever been silenced and survived it anyway. Later that day, White House Correspondents' Room, a White House press secretary addressed the nation. "The president has been briefed on the case involving Dr. Naomi Ellis. Civil Rights Division officials are coordinating with federal investigators to ensure immediate review of all related procedures. The Department of Justice is watching closely. We must do more than apologize. We must reform." At home that night, Naomi sat beside her father again. The house was still, but not silent. It hummed with calls for action, calls she hadn't asked for but could no longer ignore. Charles looked at her over his glasses. "You're not just part of the story anymore," he said. "You've become the question this country has to answer." Naomi exhaled slowly. "And the answer?" she asked. Her father didn't hesitate. "Depends on whether we keep showing up." 10:02 a.m., Washington, D.C., the Capitol was brimming with cameras in quiet anticipation. The marble halls that had once echoed with the rhetoric of men who wrote laws but ignored lives now welcomed a woman who had lived the consequences of those laws. Naomi stood before the Congressional Oversight Committee, flanked by civil rights leaders and Department of Justice officials. Her white coat was gone. Today, she wore a navy blue suit, simple, sharp, and unmistakably deliberate. Her wrist bore the faint outline of handcuffs, not as shame but as evidence. "I'm not here to ask for sympathy," she began, her voice calm, deliberate. "I'm here to demand structural dignity." Gasps didn't come, just silence. Heavy, thoughtful silence. Because the question isn't whether racism exists in policing. We've answered that. The question is, will this government continue funding systems that quietly criminalize blackness? A congressman shifted in his seat. Another pressed his lips tightly. Naomi didn't blink. You've poured billions into training, reform, and PR campaigns, and yet every year, people who look like me end up dead, arrested, or broken while doing everyday things. Driving, shopping, breathing. She leaned forward slightly. This isn't about one night in Savannah. It's about every person who has ever been told that their humanity is negotiable. Meanwhile, the Havana Police Department, that same morning, chaos brewed behind closed doors. An anonymous whistleblower, never publicly identified, had leaked a trove of internal body cam footage. Over 120 hours of recordings, unfiled complaints, excessive force incidents, illegal searches, evidence destruction. Worse still, a secret Slack channel used by a dozen officers had surfaced. The messages were ugly, racial slurs, memes mocking black suspects, jokes about planting evidence. One message stood out. Got another Naomi tonight. Put her in her place. By 3:45 p.m., the hammer fell. The FBI raided the Savannah precinct. 7 officers were taken into custody. 2 captains were placed on immediate leave. The former chief of police was subpoenaed. And Rick Coleman, the officer who had grabbed Naomi's wrist that night, was now indicted under federal civil rights law. In a public statement, Attorney General Renee Alston said, "Let this be clear. When power is abused under the color of law, it will be met with the full force of justice. This is not about one department. This is about a culture that must be dismantled." 7:11 p.m., Naomi's home. Naomi sat on her porch, phone buzzing with hundreds of messages, but she was silent, legs folded beneath her, eyes on the sunset like she was learning how to breathe again. Her father stepped out with 2 glasses of iced tea. "You changed the country," he said. Naomi shook her head slowly. "Not yet, but we made it look at itself." He sat beside her. For the first time in weeks, they didn't speak about hearings, cases, press conferences, or laws. Just the sky, just stillness, and the quiet truth that sometimes the most radical act isn't shouting, it's standing tall, even when the world tells you to sit down. Takeaway lesson: Naomi's story isn't just about a wrongful arrest. It's about what happens when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. It's about a nation finally forced to look at its reflection and not look away. We live in a world where systems often confuse authority with accountability, where voices are dismissed unless backed by power. But dignity isn't given by systems. It's owned, carried, and defended. This story teaches us that truth doesn't whisper forever. Eventually, it demands to be heard. That one quiet refusal can shake a city. The law isn't justice until someone dares to hold it to its promises. So if you've ever been told to stay quiet, to accept humiliation, to lower your eyes and move on, remember Naomi Ellis. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply stood still and let the storm come to her. And when it did, she didn't break. She became the eye of it.